Good morning and welcome. And I am really, really excited about this talk this morning because I have a fabulous guest. And she is...
Hi there, I'm Claire McDonell-Liu and I'm based in the Midlands in England.
And tell me how you got interested in real food.
Well, it's been a bit of a journey, but it started really when we had our first child. I think we thought we were pretty healthy anyway. We kind of didn't eat takeaways and junk food very often, and we thought we were pretty healthy, but it just made us reevaluate our whole eating. We really wanted to our son and our family to be really healthy, so we started looking into real food. And then I became a breastfeeding, I trained as a breastfeeding advisor locally, and it just blew my mind, the information and the importance of breast milk and the importance of nutrition for children generally. And that started us down quite a long road, really.
That's wonderful. Did you know that I do the same thing?
No, it's so important.
For my whole life in keto, and I still am. I'm a professional doula. I have doulaed for nearly 1,000 women in childbirth, and I bet a lot of people don't know that infants are born in a state of ketosis, and if they are breastfed, they are kept in a state of ketosis for up to 2 months. So, and I'm not talking about breastfed just for 2 months, because of course the World Health Organization thinks that we should be breastfeeding exclusively for 6 months, and I absolutely support that. But they stay in ketosis for 2 months. And what people don't realize is that because human babies are really big-headed and have to be born to these human mothers who need to walk upright, we have one of the greatest risks of brain trauma at birth of any mammal on the planet. And so if that baby does experience any kind of trauma at delivery, any kind of brain bleed, any kind of difficult delivery that impacts their brain, being in ketosis actually protects their brain, which is why it is so important. But one bottle of formula in the hospital changes all of that. So I didn't know you were a breastfeeding advocate, so that's awesome.
So passionate about it.
After that, you had babies and your babies grew up, and tell me a little bit about what happened with your son.
Well, he was so healthy and so robust, and we were just absolutely bowled over, just having the best time. And he always bounced back if he ever got a sniffle. There was no major problems. We were lucky, but he had skin problems. He had he started off having cradle cap, like lots of children do, but then it continued and it grew down his forehead and onto the bridge of his nose, and it became really, really unsightly and uncomfortable on hot days particularly. So that was a concern. And then as time went on, he started getting dry patches, and then when we started weaning him onto foods, he if he touched foods or if he ate or if it spilled it, he would get red patches around his mouth. And then he started getting welts on his torso when he'd been in contact with food or when he'd just eaten. They'd only last for up to 20 minutes. They didn't cause him a lot of problems, but we were concerned that there was an underlying problem. And then, so we were back and forth to the doctors, getting it checked out and whatnot, trying to get photos of these bubbles and welts and dry skin patches. And then he developed eczema, starting off with the creases of his elbows and his legs. And that developed and developed and developed and regressed, if you like. And we were going through the mill with hospital appointments and doctor's appointments. We changed doctors during this time, and we changed hospitals.
At that time?
So it started from very young with a cradle cap, but the eczema developed at some point in the first year and then progressed until he was around the age of 2, 2.5. He was bleeding, and we were going to hospital regularly. We were trying all sorts of different emollients and creams and wraps. I was putting stickers on his fingernails at night. Could not get him to sleep because that seemed to be his most itchy time. I was constantly following him around, trying to get him to stop itching by saying "stop itching," as if that helped. Poor thing. And then the sleep was just so impacted. And I always, when people used to say, "Oh, we've got a skin problem, I've got psoriasis, or I've got eczema," I just didn't give it that much thought. We don't have it in the family. But it really impacted on how happy he was, his sleep, I was on a hot day covering him up in long sleeves and trousers and trying to get him to not scratch. And I bought specialist gloves, I bought specialist pajamas, silk pajamas, and all sorts of stuff over months and over a year and a bit. Yeah.
And then what happened?
Well, I went. I had a different hospital appointment, and I remember speaking to the doctor and saying, well, he's also having patches of his hair fall out, and he's got bold, shiny patches here and there appearing. He was diagnosed with alopecia areata, so a different set of hospital appointments for that. And so I was saying to this particular skin specialist at a new hospital, well, let's do an investigation, let's join up the dots. These are autoimmune conditions, aren't they? What's going on? There must be an underlying factor here. And I just really appreciate a good conversation. He was saying, this is the way we treat things. We will treat the symptoms. I'm not saying we're doing the right thing, but I'm telling you frankly that we're not going to we're not even going to look for the underlying cause. And I was already researching, and I was already kind of coming up with ideas, but I just really kind of lit a fire in me that we're going to have to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to have to support him. And I think from the journey of finding out so much information about the breastfeeding and how important nutrition is, it was very much on my mind to kind of that's going to be a bit of a focus. So me and my husband, he's been amazing throughout all of this. So we did a lot of research. We'd already opted for sugar-free, so we're now making his foods, and I'd already baby-led weaned and encouraged him to kind of have less sweet foods, more kind of so not focusing on the sweet kind of bananas that he could have, focusing on the vegetables and things like that he could eat. But as time had developed, I'd cut out sugar completely. I'd replaced it with dates, and I was actually making him way more treats than I would have naturally given him. And I was going mad on these absolutely delicious little chocolate date treat things. And then I started looking up Western A price information, food information, and GAPS kind of diets, and it just kind of all clicked in. Sugars, we just needed to. We were already very much real food focused and organic food and good sourcing, but then we put him on our own protocol. It was very much GAPS or Western A price inspired, and we really cut out the sugars in other foods as well. So the dates went, and lots of things went. We went for bone broths and really stimulating gut supportive, digestive supportive, focusing on real nutrient dense, great quality fats, and embrace fats. Then that was the start of us making our own tallow, and which we've been making for a little while, which is a bit like a lard fat, and that started featuring in our diet, and it became just really, I'd say, really simple, old-fashioned farm type foods: meats, fats, eggs, low starch vegetables. And he was around 2.5. He just ate what we put in front of him, so it was a great time to be doing that with him. And within days, if not weeks, he started improving. So he was bleeding, he was itching constantly, he was upset. But the first thing I noticed was the itching stopped. So then the patches that I was having to put bandages on, they started to kind of naturally start to heal, because he wasn't attacking the same areas all of the time. And within 3 months, we've got a photo of him at one point and a photo of him 3 months later. His skin was glowing, and we were able to go on a family holiday.
Oh, I would love to see that. You're going to have to send that to me.
I will. I mean, they're family pics, so they're not the best quality, but I will, because it really highlights just how grim he was, and how his little body had patches of red and sores all over him, and then he's got lovely skin 3 months later. So I was just again bowled over about the power of nutrition, and how we can think we're doing the right thing and we're getting it so wrong.
And so just for people who'll be watching this, the GAPS diet is the gut psychology syndrome, right? Gut and psychology syndrome?
Gut and psychology syndrome, yes, that's right.
It's a low carb diet that is very gut protective. So roughly how many grams of carbohydrates, I mean, he was just a little guy, but roughly how many grams of carbohydrates would you say he was getting on a daily basis?
It's actually really difficult for me to be sure now at this stage, but it would almost have been, I mean, it was a low carb diet, and I didn't know that at the time. It wasn't until I realized and kind of got into my carb knowledge and ketosis knowledge later on that I realized he would have almost been in ketosis at some point. He was very, very low carb, but I'm not sure. I do have his diet sheets from way back when, so I can kind of just have a little flick through the numbers. That would be quite interesting.
That would be really fascinating, and I'm sure a lot of parents would really like to know what that looked like. Now, in terms of you know, your son, what is he eating today? And how is his skin today? So has that continued, or does he periodically have, you know, rough times? Are there certain things that you know, that do trigger an outbreak?
So that was 6 years ago, and we had the miraculous like turnaround of his skin, and he has since then he's had maybe one episode or maybe at a push two of dry skin, but nothing, not the itchiness, not the big problems that we had, and all sorts of the welts and he's not experienced any hair loss as well. So I feel really, really, really lucky that for a very good long period of time he was on those, you know, now I realise very low carb and gut healing bone broth daily, every single day bone broth, and that seems to have really, really done the trick. And now I describe his diet as at home, processed food free, naturally low carbohydrates. We don't we haven't had pasta or rice or bread in house for a very long time, but now he's 8 years old, he's suddenly saying that he wants those things. So we are now having to negotiate with somebody who knows his own mind, and that's part of the family kind of negotiating. So I'm bringing in occasional sprouted bread and that type of thing, and changing it to suit him, particularly when he has a school friend coming round. That's when he wants his food to appear like other people. So that's a bit of a process for us. But generally in the house, I mean, we certainly don't have any junk food. We have very minimal processed food, and we typically eat a plate of veggies with meat, or meat with fish, and a nice portion of fat of some description there. And he's eating great.
What about you know, going to friends' birthday parties? Have you had to cross that hurdle yet?
Yes, and that's yeah, and so for the first period of time when he was very, very young, we were very restrictive. We wanted his to heal his skin, and he was, I mean, it was although it's a skin problem, an autoimmune problem, we treated it as this is his medical fix, this is his prescription. So we bought our own cakes, and we bought our own picnic to places, and at first I have to say I was a little bit awkward about that. I felt like it wasn't that I was worried about what I was eating, or it was, I think other mums looked at me as though I was judging them, because they were like, share this, it's not too bad, it's only got such and such, it's low fat, it's blah blah blah, and you know, it feels as if I'm saying, well, that's okay for you, but my child is going to have this, and I'm going to have this. So there was that social dynamic that I found tricky, and over years I've developed more and more confidence, more and more strategies, and I've passed those on to my children. And it's been a process. It has been tough at times, and it's been learning, and at some points, you know, with the different diets we've done as a family, at some points I've not wanted to eat out, and I'm really pleased to have kind of had those experiences and those struggles and come through it, and now feel really confident about saying, this is what we eat, and this is, we, you know, we don't always want to go into the why, but you know, people are generally quite interested and supportive once they've got over that, you know, oh, you're going to see what I'm going to eat. Oh, this is. And
you know, it's getting a little bit easier now. I think the you know, just the environment is a little bit easier now. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that was actually quite difficult. You couldn't actually. Yeah, is that from you or me? Oh, that was. Okay, yeah. Okay, I'll tell that. Sorry about that. You know, I think it was really difficult. Just the environment wasn't conducive to you know, to finding what you needed in order to have a really good low carb diet. And now there's so much information. There's so much out on the internet, people get it. You say you're low carb, oh yeah, I know what that is. But
And I think
not really.
I completely agree, and I absolutely feel really lucky to be doing this as a family in this time, because 4 years ago, 5 years ago, there's now the recipes are online, the resources, information is online, but also the social acceptance of us doing a different diet. Around our leafy villages that we live in, people aren't necessarily doing low carb diets, but there's definitely a few allergies thrown into the mix and a few intolerances, and and so people almost as soon as you join a school or a group, it's like, well, what's your diet? What's your specific? What's your intolerance? So that absolutely helps us. The epidemic of kind of intolerances due to poor diet.
That's true.
That's been a massive help, and is not feeling like we're just totally alone and odd. Too odd.
No, you're part of a really, really, really big, important movement. So that is so important, and I want to get to that in a minute. But you don't just have one child; you have a second child. I would like to hear a little bit about your daughter's journey.
Yeah. So while we were busy researching and fixing Rudy and focusing on his health, we had our little girl Leafy, and so we were pretty happy. Rudy's health was on the mend. We were on the up, and then back to kind of really happy, lovely family days, and just feeling really lucky, both healthy. And then out of the blue, Leafy at 6 months old had a seizure. I woke up in the bedroom, and she was next to us in the bed, in the cot next to the bed, and she was convulsing. I was trying to, I touched her and I talked to her. I picked her up, and she couldn't stop the shaking kind of violent movement she was doing. She was jiggling, she was struggling to get breath. And it was so frightening, it was. And I'd never seen a seizure. I think in my head, probably it popped in that it was a seizure. And we called an ambulance. In the confusion, and they came within 4 minutes. I thought that was fantastic, and stayed on the phone and talked me through what to do with her, put her on her side, try and make sure she's breathing and all of that. And we were
terribly stressful.
So frightening, really, really, really frightening. Just the look on her face and the breath, and how exhausting it was for her as a baby. Me and her were ambulanced into the local hospital 20 or so minutes away, maybe 25. And she was seizing most of that time. They gave her medication to stop it, and eventually it stopped. It lasted 26 minutes around that mark. She was exhausted afterwards, and we stayed in hospital definitely one night, maybe two that time. And they did all sorts of checks and tests and family history. And then they told us it was a febrile seizure linked to a childhood illness. That was the first we'd known that she had a childhood illness of ear infection or minor ear infection, something like that. And we were sent home and cracked on with it. She recovered brilliantly after a good night's sleep. And after the shock kind of went away, we got on with it, and feeling, a little disturbed by it, but that we felt like we were quite a lucky family, and that bad things don't really happen to us. So we didn't feel, I felt sure it wouldn't happen again, actually. And it did happen again. And 3 weeks later, I was bathing her and her brother, and just put her in the bath, and she went into another seizure, the same tonic-clonic, I now know what they're called. So her arms and her legs were jerking violently. I lay her on her side as I'd been shown how to, called an ambulance, and they came. Again, they blue lighted her to hospital, and again the seizure lasted well over 20 minutes, and we did medication to stop it. So at this point she was diagnosed with complex febrile seizures, complex as in because the seizures were lasting over 5 minutes, and they needed medication to stop, or they weren't stopping. And then the research began, and we were looking and reading all about febrile seizures and the percentages of children that grow out of it, which the odds looked pretty good, really. But it became a pattern, unfortunately, that it seems, with a seizure, you never know quite, it's so unpredictable. You don't know where you're going to be, what the situation is, what time of day or night or how often it's going to be, but seemed almost like every 3 weeks she would have a seizure. We started to identify that she had particular triggers, and they were excitement, heat, exertion, so bouncy castles, fun days, birthday parties, play dates, trampolines, childhood fun, paddling pools. They were really, they were everywhere we went, and they were things that might trigger a seizure. It became really isolating. I didn't want to go out. I had 2 children. Really was just 2.5, a bit over at this point. Leafy under 1, so 2 very young children. And not only didn't people understand it, but it felt like just such a big mission to go out anywhere, and a seizure might happen, or an episode of distress. She was starting to have episodes where she would scream and cry and cry and cry, and it was definitely linked. What kind of episodes they were, I don't know, but it was really hard to manage being out and about. So as a mum to 2 young children, I was becoming quite isolated, stressed, anxious, and started not going out very much, not mixing with the other mums, and withdrew from my mum circles that I just established. My support networks, we didn't really have any. So thank goodness for Facebook communities.
Indeed. So when did you start her on a ketogenic diet?
So she was 6 months when this began, and they were febrile seizures, so she was not medicated. And we went to see our neurologist, consultant regularly. We had appointments, and he would explain, and we would get all the tests and the MRI and all sorts to check. She wasn't having non-febrile epileptic activity, and she wasn't. But he would tell us each time, if she is diagnosed with epilepsy, if she has a non-febrile seizure, she'll be diagnosed then with epilepsy. She will need a therapy. The therapy is this medication first, and then we will up and up and up and up and up the dose. And then if that doesn't work, we'll add another medication, and we might wean, or we might. And these are the range of medications that we're likely to try for children. These are the ones that are most effective. And we were concerned, but we were about the medication, but we were more concerned about stopping these seizures. We needed a suitable therapy. So we were looking, and we were contacting Facebook communities. We were looking at the options. We were looking at case studies. Our bedtime reading was, all sorts around epilepsy disorders, conditions, triggers, treatment. And this was every single night. I mean, I don't know how when we ever slept, but the way we found the ketogenic diet was reading a family's blog. And I
have dogs.
You didn't mention a dog. Hello. And then so we found a blog of a Canadian family, and I tried to reach out to thank them years later, and I just couldn't find them again. They've gone. But they had a little girl called Nora, and from Canada, and their little seizures were managed with a particular specific diet that they were blogging and recording in detail. And she was drinking a pot of olive oil with every meal and snack, and she was taking it to school with her, so she would have that, drinking it on the side of every snack. So I was like, wow, what's this all about? And so that triggered me kind of looking into it, finding the resources that were starting to emerge. There were the different charities, the Charlie Foundation, Matthew's Friends. They didn't have the video recipes and the amount of recipes and information that they have now. The resources have really improved. But it was a lot of kind of trundling around the internet and piecing it together, and then bringing it to my consultant and my daughter's consultant and saying, what about the ketogenic diet? Speaking to dietitian friends, speaking to doctor friends.
And what did they say to you? What did they say? What was their response when you brought that to them?
So interestingly, I found that there was a ketogenic diet clinic in our own hospital, and we'd not been told it was an option. And there's not that many around the UK. They're dotted here and there, but we're really close by the hub for a large area. And we were told that we wouldn't be considered for the waiting list. My daughter wouldn't, because she's not tall enough, she's not intractable. Not that she's not poorly, but you have to have intractable epilepsy. So you have to have gone through the medication treatments and upped your dose and tried it. And then
you have to do medication first before a dietary therapy.
That is the diet protocol, and still is. And there are very, very few doctors that I know of that will consider other therapies first, unless it's a particular metabolic gene condition that they know.
Blood deficiencies, yeah. Tell me about starting Leafy on the ketogenic diet. You were saying that, you know, your physicians really had wanted you to wait until medication had been tried. When did you actually say, I'm going to do this?
So we were discussing this, my husband and I, we were researching, and we both found the research, the evidence that was out there absolutely overwhelming in favour of ketogenic diet. And we understood that it had been tried in limited applications and mainly for children, but it didn't seem a good reason not to apply it first as a first line therapy for many different seizure conditions. So we weren't convinced about the case, and the reasons we were given not to try ketogenic diet first, because we kept asking the question. Apart from that, the protocol states that it should be for intractable epilepsy, so medication should come first. But the reasons we were given were that the side effects of ketosis and the ketogenic diet were really bad and overwhelming for a patient. But when we contrasted that, when we got the sheets of information on the medication that they wanted us to try first, they were, I mean, it was line after line after line of serious side effects, including convulsions, including memory impairment, cognitive function impairment, and as well as kidney, liver, all sorts of other issues. But for a 2-year-old child, I mean, she was in between 1 and 2 when we were considering this, memory and behavioural issues that medication could cause side effects in, we were far more concerned with the side effects of the medication. And speaking to families on epilepsy forums, the overwhelming information we were receiving was that the side effects are very, very real from the medication that was being played down by the medical professionals that we were in contact with. But the ketogenic diet side effects, I mean, some of them are extreme positives, you know, cognitive protection or even enhancement. And the things that they were concerned about, growth, not meeting your growth potential, and kidney stones, that type of thing, you can mitigate that as hospitals that have run these research projects have shown, by mitigating that by opting for real foods, nutrient dense foods, and modified version, lowering your fat ratios. You really are mitigating the potential for side effects. So it seemed such a sensible step for us, but we didn't feel very comfortable doing that in the UK, and we felt that the professionals would not support us. So we thought a second opinion would be good for us as a family, and perhaps a lifestyle change would be good. So we moved temporarily to Australia, where Justin, my husband, is from, and we thought the weather might improve her condition, the outdoor lifestyle, less bugs and less illnesses, because they were a big seizure trigger, and we would get a second opinion from their from the epilepsy team, the neurologists over there, which we did do. And I really like how frank Australian medical professionals are. It seems that they've got a different take on things. They said, no, we can't support you with your preference for a ketogenic diet because our waiting list is so long and it's so under-resourced, which is so refreshingly honest. But we don't see why I don't go for it. Yes, it's not a good approach. So she was diagnosed with epilepsy over there, and her condition spiraled out of control in Australia. It went from she started getting experiencing seizures more often. They became myoclonics. Her sudden jerk seizures became around 60 a day in clusters and affecting her walking and her speech. She was not sleeping at all. She was screaming, and just her sleep quality, her quality of life. Her tonic-clonic major seizures increased in length. She had her longest seizure out there, 45 minutes, medication that we carry, medication that the ambulance crew gave her didn't stop it. And they were becoming more often. They became twice a week as well, the major seizures.
Terrifying, isn't it?
Our quality of life as a whole family was awful, absolutely awful. And she was just struggling and suffering so much. She was losing her personality amidst this chaos of this seizure epidemic she was struggling with. So we got ourselves prepared and ready, and we went for a general checkup with her. She was diagnosed with epilepsy because a non-febrile seizure was spotted at that point. And then we took action and put her on the ketogenic diet ourselves straight away.
What was your first 2 days of keto like with your daughter? And what type of keto were you using? Because as you and I have discussed in the past, when you say keto, it means different things to different people. So tell me a little bit about the first 2 days and when you first noticed a difference in her seizure activity.
Yeah, so with the first 2 days, we opted for modified ketogenic diet, and most of the information on epilepsy diets at that point were classic. So we had read about modified, and we thought that as we were introducing this ourselves and managing it ourselves day to day, that would be a sensible step. And if we could get ketones and if we could get the results we were hoping, why make it a classical? Meaning, why would we have 4 or 3.5 portions of fat for every 1 of protein and carbs? Why wouldn't we go for a lower option of 2 portions of fat for 1 portion of carb and protein? Because then we could get more food into her, more varied, wide-ranging carbohydrates. And we also opted for, with my massive interest in nutrition at that point, we made sure that the carbohydrates counted, but also that all of it was well sourced and good quality, and the fats were also nutrient dense, and wide-ranging. So so 2 to 1 meant that she could was unlimited drinking, unlimited portions, and gave us much more flexibility in what we were able to feed her. But that said, we did make mistakes in the beginning, and I think the biggest mistake, and anybody looking at following a ketogenic diet for health or for any reason, I would say keep it simple. We were just overcomplicating matters. We were looking at recipes and dishes, and then replicating those and balancing out and weighing and measuring, which I think was very important for us to get the consistency, to get into ketosis, and to make sure we were managing everything safely and well. The weighing and the measuring was time consuming because I wasn't used to carbohydrates. I wasn't used to carb counting. I'd never done any calorie counting or any diet counting at all before. So it's a steep learning curve, what carbs were in what, weighing that up against proteins and weighing that out. And then I was making overly complicated frittatas and muffins, and I was up till 2, 3 in the morning making things. And then there'd be an absolute fail the next day. It was food she wasn't familiar with and didn't like. And she wasn't a carb head. She wasn't really ever fixed on rice cakes and potatoes or anything like that high starchy kind of food. She wasn't. So the transition for her was quite natural and seamless. But I would definitely say keep foods really, really basic and simple. You just need a bit of veggies with a little bit of protein, a bit of tuna or fish or something, and then a nice dollop of whatever, egg mayo or something, mayonnaise or something simple in the beginning. Avocado, fabulous, So apart from getting it a little bit overcomplicated and getting myself in a tangle with recipes and logs and spreadsheets and all sorts, the great thing was she took to the foods mainly, really, really quickly, and she produced ketones within 3 days. And as soon as that kicked in, the short burst seizures she was experiencing, the 60 a day that other children were noticing and were hampering her, kind of mixing in the playground and all sorts, they went, and they haven't come back. She's been on the diet now over 4.5 years, and they have never come back. And that in itself was an utter win, because that's affecting her day-to-day living. And then her major seizures, the one that I said she had a 45-minute one just before we started, they started ebbing away really rapidly too. They became from 2 a week to to fortnightly, to monthly, to great big gaps of months in between, and they became shorter, and so short they became self-resolving. We didn't need to give her the horrendous medication that we were giving to stop. It was dramatic. It was absolutely stunning.
Crying every single day because my uterus aches for you. As a mom, I know how hard it is when your child is suffering.
I think
to see this happen because of food, because of salmon and broccoli and butter. And how people prevent that by saying you can't do it, or I'm not going to support you doing it. That's where I really struggle. And although I'm a very big advocate of having physicians on board and making sure that families and physicians are communicating about this, no doctor will tell you that salmon and broccoli are bad for you. So why is it that just stopping all sugar and complex carbs in a diet requires intensive dietary management at a hospital level? I don't think it does. I think everybody should have access to that, especially if they're doing it therapeutically. But to prevent a family from experiencing the relief that your daughter felt, I don't understand that piece. I just can't imagine your relief.
I really feel that the belief isn't there. I really do feel that when we talk to people, even now, I really feel that there's a lot of people who just think we got lucky and it's a one-off. And I really, really want this to be accessible to other families and then not to have to go alone. I don't think they should be going it alone, because you can get these things wrong, and there are some side effects if you kind of overdose on the fats and whatnot. You want to be doing it. You want your blood markers tested, and I did want my daughter's. So we did get back in touch with the hospital in the UK and said, these are our results. We've achieved this, and she was in this state, and now she's doing so well, and everything is kind of in hand. And they said, well, they've got no room for us still in the Ketogenic clinic, but the dietitian was so lovely that she met me in reception, and she arranged for them to take the bloods and check how she was doing and keep her monitored. But we were at arm's length. But because we'd done it, they kind of we kind of forced their hand that they had to support us. I mean, I said to them, if I'm going to wait any longer for support, then I'll just get the bloods done myself privately. And that seemed to do the trick, because they did wait quite a long time to get that. But as for feeling elated, we felt relieved, but I think we were in such an exhausted state. It was just more of an absolute relief to be getting her back, because the seizure control came rapidly. And not just that, she started to have deeper sleep quite quickly, and over a long period of time, the sleep came and became earlier, because it was taking me 4 hours to get her to sleep at night, every single night. And then the slightest noise, or any slight noise, would wake her up, and we'd just go again. And so that came back slowly. But her happiness came back. The distress crying went away, that she was often really distressed, and her overall health improved because she was getting that deep sleep and that relief from the seizures, and she wasn't having the strong medication to stop the seizures. So it was an emerging picture of health and of relief, and as rebuilding ourselves as a family. And I actually think that a good while later, maybe a year later, I felt like I had post-traumatic stress or something.
Yes.
I could finally breathe and look back and think that was utterly horrendous, what we've experienced, and the effect on our quality of life, and the effect on us, and how exhausted we've been, and stressed and anxious, and it just kind of hit me quite.
You're not alone, and I know I experienced that myself after my seizures resolved. About a year later, I had a really low period where I was just afraid that it might all end and that this was just a dream, but also just recognizing the terror and the pain and the suffering that our family had been going through. That really is a thing, and I think families don't have enough connectivity around that, and don't even acknowledge it maybe as much as they could, and provide support for each other as much as they could, because just clinging to every single day when you think your child might die in the midst of a 45-minute long seizure, that is intensely stressful. So I can completely see how PTSD would be a thing. But instead of, this whole experience just being sort of one negative blip in your life and moving on, you and your husband have done something quite extraordinary. You've started this great website, and I'd like you to tell me about what support you're offering people now.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. So after all of this, so I mean, we're still connected with epilepsy, the epilepsy community, and nutrition has just become such an important part of my life. I retrained. I quit my old environmental consultancy work, and I now am trained as a nutrition advisor. I just want to spread the word on what nutrition can do. I'm absolutely an advocate for keto, but also low carb diets, depending on what stage your health is at, and for families generally, reducing your sugar intake. But all in a nutshell, everybody eating a better quality diet by eating real foods. So I'm completely passionate about it, and about the effects it can have on mental health and weight and diabetes and epilepsy and cancer, and absolutely across the board, just to feel well and have more energy by improving foods. So we've set up our organisation, a non-profit organisation called Leafy.org, and we have been sharing real life stories of people who have turned their health around by eating real food diets. So there's different families who, some experience, a young girl's experienced bowel disease, and another little boy had a tumour and lost his speech because of an operation to remove the tumour, and the wins and the gains and the amazing work that they have done to find real foods nutrition, different stories. So I wanted to share what is possible with other people to inspire them. And we're also putting together resources. We've just published our sugar-free family course.
Great.
It's a resource for people to get started. They don't know, they know food is important. They're being told that there's so much, their cereals are wrong and their lunches are wrong, but they don't know, what to go for, what to buy, and it needs to be affordable. So we put together pretty much our 3 favourite family meals: lunches, breakfast, snacks and drinks, and we've been really lucky to have a number of doctors and medical professionals and experts who've given us some tips and added some bite-sized chunks of information on there to share with people. And that's a free resource. These are free resources we're putting together to inspire and support families. Maybe they don't have major health problems, but we don't want to leave it to, in 10, 20, 30 years time that the children are now grown-ups and they've got obesity or early onset diabetes too. So it's our way of, I guess, celebrating and empowering other people. And I've been giving talks as well. I've been lucky to go to some amazing events, public health collaboration in the UK. I went to an epilepsy convention in Florida last year and gave a talk there. So really just sharing the message. We're working on local programs as well, working with local community who is quite a deprived community, and they want some cooking education. So we're doing that with them, and local school programs. And they're special needs students who have autism, working with them to improve their diet, because a lot of people in either deprived communities and autism communities really get left behind in terms of not eating real foods, whether it's exacerbating the problem, whether they have underlying intolerances, or whether it could just streamline their health and support them a little or a lot. We're working with them to introduce them to real foods and get them trying foods where they've got particular food avoidance issues, and some have been working with us to eat real foods for a whole program, and they've had really good wins in terms of energy and alertness and mood.
That is incredible, and those resources are so needed. And Thank God for modern technology and the internet, because people can find you from all over the world now, not just the UK. Where would they go to get that information on that, helping your family kick sugar course that you've got happening?
So that's available on our website, which is leafy.org.
Great, and we'll make sure that we put that in the show notes.
Thank you. That's great. It's a free resource, and the idea is just our remit is just to help and support as many families as possible. And even if you're thinking about ketosis and ketogenic diets for a variety of great reasons, because it has benefits across the board, and you don't know where to start, going sugar-free and introducing real foods and getting off the refined carbohydrates, that could be your step one. Take that course, challenge yourself to follow those recipes, and you'll be gearing yourself up quite nicely to upping your fats for the next stage.
That's fantastic. Well, I have to thank you so much for sharing the stories this morning, especially your family's journey, because it's been a really bumpy one, but it's people like you who just refuse to give up and stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning reading the research, who are able to not just advocate for their own families, but provide that advocacy for other families. And I really thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I know that this story is going to impact someone who really needs to hear it.
Oh, thank you so much, Gillian. I find your work and your story really inspirational as well, so it's lovely to connect. But thank you. I really do hope our story can inspire, can help other people.
I'm 100% sure of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.